Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My wife of 15 years asked me to open our marriage to be with her boss, but when I rejected her and left, her perfect plan fell apart in 24 hours. Greetings to everyone on Reddit. I have a story I need to share. My wife, Ran 37, and I, Vaughn, also 37, have been a couple since we were teenagers. We met when we were 15 and have been together ever since. I feel like we grew up together, discovering life step by step. After finishing high school, we both went to university, and a year after graduating, we decided to get married. It was the easiest decision I've ever made. We both got well-paid jobs. I started to develop in my field, building my professional career. A few years ago, I took the big leap and set up my own business. It took countless late nights, a lot of stress, and more caffeine than I'd like to admit, but now things are going pretty well. Ren works as a marketing consultant. She has always shown great passion for her profession and is truly talented in what she does. She knows perfectly well how to promote products, how to make a brand stand out, and has that special mindset that makes everything fit together perfectly. I've always admired that quality in her. For 15 years, our marriage was rock solid. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we were happy. We always found time for each other, enjoyed holidays together, spent quiet weekends at home, and dedicated our evenings to watching programs or simply chatting about how our day had gone. It wasn't always exciting, but it was comfortable and safe. We were partners in every sense. Everything changed when Ren took a new job last year. At first, I was really excited for her. It was an exceptional opportunity at a well-known company. She was offered an excellent salary. She was delighted, so naturally I supported her, but the job ended up absorbing her whole life. Suddenly, she started working impossible hours, early mornings, late nights, whole weekends. She was always busy. Initially, I told myself it was normal. It was a new position and she wanted to prove herself. I understood how much this opportunity meant to her, and I didn't want to be the one to complain. But as the weeks turned into months, the situation only got worse. She started bringing work home, taking calls during dinner, answering emails at midnight. She barely had time for anything else. Our nightly routine disappeared completely. We no longer sat together on the sofa. We no longer talked about our day. We no longer did movie marathons on weekends. I went to sleep alone most nights. And when she finally joined me, she was too exhausted even to talk. I tried to be understanding. I really tried with all my might. I kept telling myself that this was temporary, that once she settled into her new role, things would improve. But they didn't. I began to seriously worry about her health. She wasn't eating properly, always eating in a hurry or skipping meals altogether. She wasn't getting enough rest, waking up tired and drinking coffee like it was water. She barely had time to do anything other than work. I mentioned it a few times delicately at first. I expressed my concern, suggesting that maybe she should take things more calmly, that she didn't need to push herself so hard. I even suggested that if the work was too much, she could consider quitting and taking a break. Our financial situation was stable. She didn't need to work herself to the point of exhaustion like that. She always dismissed my comments. She said she loved her job, that it was challenging, exciting, and that she was learning a lot. She made it clear to me that she had no intention of quitting, and she said it so firmly that I decided not to insist any further. I wanted to respect her decision, but as time went by, I felt more and more that I was losing her. I tried to be patient. I kept telling myself that this was just a temporary phase. Deep down, I was beginning to feel that I was completely alone in our marriage. However, about 7 months ago, my world fell apart when Ren told me that he wanted to transform our marriage into a polygamous relationship. At first, I thought I had heard wrong, or maybe he was joking, but no, he was completely serious. I felt like the ground had disappeared from under my feet. It was like a bomb had gone off in front of me. I didn't even know how to process what I was hearing. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. My mind was racing and I could hardly understand why he was saying these things. He explained that he had never been with anyone but me and that he had started to feel like he was missing out on important experiences. I just sat there trying to understand what he meant by that. I had always thought of us as an unbreakable unit, the two of us against the world, you know? We had been together for so long that the idea that he was now completely questioning our relationship. I felt as if someone had hit me with a heavy object. I asked him where all this was coming from. I needed to know. I thought that maybe there was some problem that had been building up over time, or perhaps something had happened without me realizing it. He assured me that it wasn't about anything specific. She said she had simply been reading about polygamy and thought it might be something interesting to experiment with. I was completely stunned. I couldn't understand it. I've heard of people having open relationships, practicing polyamory and similar concepts, but I never imagined, even remotely, that Ren would want something like that for us. I asked her again, more urgently this time, if she was completely sure, if she had someone specific in mind. She denied it. There was no one else. It was simply an idea she had been considering. I wanted to believe her, but at that moment I didn't know what to think. I kept wondering why now. Why would she want this after all these years of happiness together? Of it just being the two of us, the idea of her with another person, of her sharing intimacy with another man, was something I simply couldn't assimilate. I told her in all honesty that I had no interest in such a relationship. I told her the very idea of imagining her with another man would destroy me inside. It was the absolute truth. And I didn't want to hide how I felt because I was hurt, confused and frightened. She assured me that it would be purely physical, that it wouldn't change our emotional connection, that she would still be my wife. She promised me that nothing would change between us, that she just wanted to experience something different. But honestly, the more I explained it, the less sense it made to me. If she still loved me, why did she need something else? I couldn't help wondering if I wasn't enough. If there was something I wasn't doing right or something she needed that I wasn't providing. She insisted so much on the subject, saying it was something she really wanted to try, that I asked her directly if there was anyone specific she was interested in. Was there anyone she was attracted to? Someone she was already in some kind of relationship with? She continued to deny it, claiming it was just an idea, something she was mentally exploring. But no matter how much she tried to reassure me, I couldn't help feeling this deep sense of unease. I had the impression that there was something more to this story and that she wasn't telling me the whole truth. She went to sleep after our conversation and I tried to rest too, but it was impossible. I simply couldn't sleep. I'd lay awake for hours, reflecting, going over the conversation again and again in my mind. I couldn't stop asking myself, what did I do wrong? Why would Ren suddenly want something like that? Why was this happening now after so many years of happiness together? I started to question absolutely everything. I felt terribly alone with my thoughts. I wondered if I had missed any important signs. If there had been clues that I didn't know how to interpret, or if maybe she was simply unhappy and I hadn't noticed. I've heard about couples who experiment with different dynamics in their relationships, open relationships, polyamory, all those variants. But I never imagined that we would be like that. I thought Ren and I had an unbreakable relationship. We had built this life together and I simply couldn't imagine her with anyone else. I have always been a monogamous person and the idea of sharing her, even if it was only physically, was totally unacceptable to me. I have never understood how some people can do that. How do you go from being the only person someone wants to be with to suddenly sharing them with someone else? The whole concept just didn't make sense to me. But a few weeks later, Ren brought up the subject again and this time she was much more direct. She told me without hesitation that she still wanted to have a polygamous relationship and that I had to accept it or she would have to consider different options. The way she put it, practically without any emotion, as if it were just another everyday decision we had to make. It hit me like a blow to the stomach. It seemed that she had already made her decision and I was simply being presented with an ultimatum. I asked her what exactly she meant by different options. Was she talking about divorce? Was she saying that if I couldn't accept this situation, our marriage would be over? She replied that I was intelligent enough to understand what she meant, and it was then that I finally grasped the gravity of the situation. I was at a crossroads and didn't know which way to turn. I didn't want to lose her, but at the same time I couldn't ignore the feeling that everything was falling apart. Our marriage, our life together, everything seemed to be disintegrating before my eyes and I had no idea how to fix it. I thought about it deeply and in the end I felt I had no alternative. This was not something I could simply ignore and it was definitely not something I could accept. I could not conceive of a life where Ren was involved with someone else. No matter how I justified it, I could not live with the idea of sharing her and I was no longer sure if I could trust her. The connection we shared, the life we had built together, seemed to be falling apart and I didn't know how to put it back together again. So I packed my things and left. At first I wasn't sure where I would go, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I needed space to think, to breathe and to work out what I really wanted. I didn't want to make any impulsive decisions in the heat of the moment. I needed time to process all of this, to figure out if there was a way forward or if this was definitely the end for us. I didn't want to say goodbye forever, but I felt like I had no choice. Ren continued to call me insistently after I left. I didn't answer. But she didn't give up. She kept calling, sending messages and finally showed up at the hotel where I was staying. I wasn't expecting her to come and get me and, honestly, I didn't know what to think when I saw her standing there. I was completely exhausted by the emotional roller coaster of the last few days and I really didn't want to see her, but I also knew we needed to talk. Part of me hoped she had come to her senses and that maybe, just maybe, she was realizing how absurd it all sounded. But that wasn't the case. She approached me and said, "We need to talk. I think we can work this out." I replied with the firmest voice I could muster that I didn't want to talk, not under these circumstances. But she insisted and repeated, "We need to talk. I have to explain everything to you." I didn't want to hear any more of her justifications, but I knew I couldn't just walk away without listening to her, so reluctantly I agreed to hear what she had to say. She began by saying that she didn't want to hurt me, but that she just wanted to experience the thrill of a polygamous relationship for a while. The idea that she needed some kind of excitement outside our marriage felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't understand how she could be saying this after all these years. After everything we had built together, it didn't make sense to me, so I asked her directly, "Who exactly are you planning to have this polygamous relationship with?" I needed to know. I needed to understand how far this situation had gone. He didn't hesitate for a second. He confessed that it was his boss. I felt my stomach churning. He explained that he had been working closely with him for the past year and that they had become very close. He said he couldn't help how he felt, that the attraction between them was undeniable. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me and had to make an effort to remain steady. My mind was racing. I wasn't talking about just anyone. I was talking about her boss. The person she spent so much time with whom she worked until late at night, with whom she developed professional projects. I felt betrayed in a way that words cannot express. She said, "I want to enjoy the thrill of being your special partner, but I also want to remain married to you." I could only stare at her, unable to respond initially. How could she say something like that? How could she even think it was reasonable to ask me for something of that nature? My mind was working at full speed as I tried to process it all, but it was impossible. I kept thinking of all the times over the last year when she had been distant, when she had been working late and had no time for me. I thought she was just busy with her work responsibilities, but now it all made sense in the worst possible way. I asked her directly, "Is this why you've been so busy with work? Is this why you've been ignoring me for the last year?" She nodded and explained that at first it was because she was trying to make a good impression in her new work environment. She said that initially she was only focused on proving herself, but then things changed. She and her boss started working more closely on different projects, and that's when the attraction arose. She assured me that she loved me, but that she couldn't stop thinking about him. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stand there frozen in disbelief as she continued talking. She said that since her boss was also interested in her, she thought that polygamy would be the best way to make it all work. I couldn't even process her words. I just stood there in a daze. This was the woman I loved, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, and she was standing in front of me telling me that she wanted to be with me as well as another man. The casual way she talked about it made me feel like I was just an interchangeable element in her life. I was supposed to accept that she wanted more, that I should share her, and I just couldn't understand it. I told her as calmly as I could that I didn't want to be part of this arrangement. I didn't want to share her. I didn't want a life where we weren't exclusive to each other. I said, "You can't have it both ways. Not with me. I'm not going to be part of this." She didn't seem to take it well and tried to persuade me, trying to convince me that it wouldn't change anything between us and that I could do the same if I wanted to. She claimed that we could both have whatever we wanted, but I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't imagine a life where we both had to divide ourselves between each other and other people. That wasn't what love meant to me. That wasn't a marriage. It was just a twisted game, and I absolutely refused to play. I said to her, "This is sick. This conversation is making me sick." I had been trying to stay strong, trying to control my emotions, but I couldn't anymore. I asked her to leave. I couldn't bear to be around her, not after everything she had said. For the time being, we decided that we would simply separate temporarily. It seemed the most appropriate thing to do at the time, but honestly, after 15 years of marriage, starting the divorce proceedings was more difficult than I had anticipated. We didn't rush into anything, and a couple of months passed before I even considered what the next step for us would be. Yesterday I got a call from Ren. She said she urgently needed to talk to me, and honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe she wanted to discuss starting divorce proceedings. Maybe it was something she needed to express. I wasn't prepared for what she had to say, but I thought we should meet so we could have a civilized conversation. She also needed to collect some belongings from the house, so it made sense to meet there. When I arrived at the house, Ren was in the doorway, looking simultaneously stressed and relieved. She said, "Thank God you came. Things are completely out of control at work." I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, and part of me felt sorry for her. We had both been through so much in the last few months, and it was hard to see her like that. But at the same time, I was still angry and hurt by everything that had happened, so I kept my distance. I asked her what had happened, and she explained that she could be fired for a professional error. Apparently, she had accidentally sent an incorrect file to a client, which caused a disaster, an important event. She said her boss was furious, and that she now had a meeting scheduled with the Human Resources Department in the next few days. I listened to her talk, but I couldn't help feeling somewhat indifferent to the situation. I asked her, the same boss who was interested in you and for whom you wanted to have a polygamous relationship? She nodded, and I could see the embarrassment reflected on her face. She admitted that things hadn't worked out with him. Apparently, he wasn't interested in her at all, and when she tried to approach him, he was surprised. He pointed out how unprofessional her behavior was, and after that, things became extremely awkward between them. She said she was now about to lose her job, and everything was falling apart. She was sitting there explaining to me how everything was going wrong, how she had no one to talk to, and it was clear that she was distressed, but I was still deeply angry about everything she had done. I couldn't feel sorry for her. It was hard enough for me to process everything she was going through without having to deal with her problems as well. And then, as we were talking, she tried to hug me. I gently pushed her away, trying to keep my emotions in check, and asked her, "Is this really why you called me to talk about your work situation?" She seemed taken aback, as if she expected more compassion from me, but I couldn't offer it. I wasn't there to solve her problems. I made it clear that I had come to collect my things and leave, as we had agreed. She asked me what I specifically needed. I explained that I was going skiing with some friends and needed to pick up my equipment. It wasn't the most important thing on my mind at the time, but I had plans and I wasn't going to cancel them just because she was going through a crisis. But Ren didn't seem to understand my position. She began to reproach me for how selfish I was for leaving while she was dealing with all this stress. She said it wasn't fair that I was abandoning her when everything in her life was falling apart. I was momentarily taken aback, but I stood my ground. I told her, "These are the consequences of your actions. You need to face them." I couldn't sugarcoat reality for her. She had made decisions that had led her to this point, and now she had to face the consequences. I couldn't carry her problems anymore. After collecting my equipment, I left the house trying to put some distance between us, but that wasn't the end of it. Things started to get even more complicated when our children got involved. Today, my daughter called me and told me that Ren had been saying things to her and to my son. Things that I thought were inappropriate. My daughter told me that Mom had mentioned that I had changed and that I no longer cared about her. She said she didn't understand why we had separated, but that Mom just needed someone to talk to. Our children had no idea what was going on between Ren and I. We hadn't told them the truth behind our separation, mainly because I didn't want to burden them with adult problems. My daughter suggested that if I could talk to Ren, it would be a big help. She said Ren just needed someone to listen to her. Someone who could understand her situation. I didn't know how to respond to that. On the one hand, I wanted to help. I didn't want my children to feel trapped in the middle of this conflict. On the other hand, I was still deeply hurt by everything that had happened. I didn't know if I could put myself in a position where I would have to talk to Ren again, let alone offer her any kind of support. I told my daughter that I would consider it, but I really don't know what to do. I turn to you, Reddit. What should I do in this situation? Should I talk to Ren? Should I try to fix things for the sake of my children's well-being? Or should I stay away and let her handle her problems on her own? I honestly don't know what to do. I need your help. Update. Hi all. I want to express my gratitude for your kind comments and suggestions. It really means a lot to me. I wanted to update you on recent developments. Ren was finally fired from her job. Reflecting on what happened, I think that her dismissal was partly due to the way she tried to get closer to her boss. Her boss is also married, and I can't help wondering if he was looking for a pretext to let her go. The whole situation seemed extremely unprofessional and, honestly, I don't understand why Ren thought it was a good idea, but that's the way it is. I still firmly believe that she is a very talented person. I have no doubt that she will find another job soon. I know she will bounce back because she is smart and hardworking, but for now she is taking some time to collect her thoughts. In the meantime, I've been looking after the children for a period while Ren determines her next steps. I'm doing my best to keep things as normal as possible for them. They've been asking about her and why we're no longer together. Children pick up on everything, and no matter how much you try to protect them, they eventually start connecting the dots. For now, we are simply telling them that Ren and I have grown apart. I don't think they need to know the whole truth. They are still young, and this situation is difficult enough for them. I don't want to put them under any unnecessary stress by explaining the specific details of what happened. They don't need to know about the whole polygamy issue or how Ren's relationship with her boss influenced this situation. It's too complex for them to understand. I have been trying to maintain as much normality as possible. I'm doing more activities with them, taking them places, spending more time at home. I know I should be there for them, especially during this period. They are the ones who are really going through a difficult time. I have had some honest conversations with my daughter, especially as she seems to be the one who feels most confused and affected by the whole situation. I've also been trying to keep busy. I've been focusing more on work and spending time with the kids to keep my mind off of it all. Anyway, that's where things currently stand. I'll keep you posted on any developments, but for now I'm concentrating on the kids and taking care of myself. Update 2. Hi everyone. I know it's been 3 months since the last update, but honestly, there haven't been any big changes. Things have settled into a routine, at least as far as the kids are concerned. They've been alternating between my old and new residences, and we've been following the joint custody agreement. It's not perfect, but it's been manageable. The kids are adjusting, although I can tell they're still having a hard time processing this whole situation. I have kept my distance from Ren since all this happened. Honestly, I don't know how to be around her without feeling angry and hurt, but last week, I finally started the divorce proceedings. I felt it was important to tell her in person, not just for the children, but to get some closure, although I wasn't sure I was prepared for the emotional cost. So I spoke to Ren as I was dropping the kids off. As soon as I told her that I had started the process, she just started crying. I mean, it was an immediate reaction. I wasn't expecting that. I know she's been affected by this whole situation, but seeing her break down like that hit me harder than I had anticipated. She began to apologize repeatedly, expressing how sorry she was for all the damage she had caused, but that didn't change anything. It was the first time I had heard her express how sorry she was for the mess she had made, and honestly, I didn't know how to react. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear it. I just stood there, paralyzed, watching her cry. She begged me to reconsider my decision and said, "Don't do this, we can work it out," but I couldn't give in. We were already done. The divorce was just a formality at this point. I felt there was no going back. Even when she was crying and apologizing, I explained that we were past the point of reconciliation. The damage was done and there was no way to repair it. It was difficult to express, but I meant it sincerely. She wouldn't stop crying, and I knew I had to leave before I said something I might regret, so I walked away. I'm not going to lie. That moment affected me much more than I expected. Seeing her cry and hearing her express how sorry she was brought back an avalanche of feelings. I thought I had overcome the situation, that I had moved on, but in that moment I realized that I still loved her. I loved her with every fiber of my being. I still do. I loved her intelligence and determination. Her unapologetic authenticity. I loved absolutely everything about the woman I married, but the person she had become was not the same. She was not the woman I fell in love with. I don't have many friends with whom I can talk openly about all this. The few people I keep in touch with, I don't feel I can be completely honest with them. How do you even begin to explain this whole complicated polygamy situation to your friends? I can't even understand it myself, let alone discuss it with other people. I just feel embarrassed, as if I had somehow failed to anticipate all this. So I guess this virtual space has become the only place where I can express myself with total honesty. You have been incredibly understanding and supportive, and it is honestly the only reason I've been able to maintain some sanity throughout this whole process. So thank you for listening. I don't know what I would do without the support of this community. Update 3. Hi everyone, this one will be brief, but I finally made it. I am officially divorced. It has been a long and complicated road, and I honestly didn't know when or if I would ever get to this point. There is still a lot to process emotionally, but I just wanted to share this update with you, especially since you have been so supportive throughout this difficult process.